Hey everyone. The Supreme Court recently has laid down a judgment that I think is pretty important. And so I want to take a few minutes to explain what it is and why I think it's a good thing. So, public sector unions are no longer able to force non union members to pay dues or fees or whatever you want to call them. And this is important because, over the last 100 years, union membership is down, union influence is greatly diminished, and this is a ruling that will reduce their ability to raise money and funds for their organizations. Overall, I don't mind unions. I don't think they violate any ethical or moral principles that I have or that I think are important. Being able to voluntarily organize a set of workers and to use that bargaining power to influence an employer is all good. It's all fine. In my ideal society, that would be a just thing. That would be okay. The problem comes when you introduce involuntary or coerced action onto people. And obviously, forcing people to pay money to an organization they don't want to be a part of is a big problem. It's a huge, huge problem. And so in a way, this is kind of a step towards legitimizing unions, in my view. So Justice Alito, in his, I think he wrote the majority opinion, he wrote the following: compelling individuals to mouth support for views they find objectionable violates that cardinal constitutional command, and in most contexts, any effort would be universally condemned. So he's basically just saying that it violates the First Amendment, and that giving money to an organization is a form of speech. And of course it is. So unions are typically very left-leaning. And while their primary objective is negotiating with the government to, on pay or benefits or work environments for their members, they're also very politically active. They support policies. They support politicians. They take stances. Just the very nature of them being left influences all of their actions. Even it's hard to say that even just the act of petitioning the government for for pay standards, for work standards, for benefits, is kind of in itself a political act, because it's seeking control over the government. I mean, I don't know how else to explain or describe a group trying to influence the government. It's inherently political. And so even if you want to say that unions don't, take hard stances on, policies or politicians, I don't think that really discredits my points at all. And so now we can go to Crazy Town and look at the dissenting opinion by Justice Elena Kagan for the case. The court, she says, the court was improperly disrespecting established precedent. Logical error number 1. We'll come back to it. She wrote that the decision prevents the American people from acting through their state and local officials from making important choices about workplace governance. That's all completely crazy too, but we have a little bit more to go. And it does so by weaponizing the First Amendment. in a way that unleashes judges now and the future to intervene in economic and regulatory policy. Okay, this last point, very silly. Absolutely, it's pretty insane to imagine that, like, in the past, the Supreme Court hasn't taken stances that greatly affect the economy and the way that it works and the rules that govern it. It's very silly, I think, pretty much grasping at straws for that point. But let's go back to the front. The court was improperly disrespecting established precedent. I can't help but just seeing that as being an argument of, we've been doing it this way for a while, so we should probably just keep doing that, which is pretty insane. On a side note, the Supreme Court, this is another pretty big thing that the Supreme Court's done recently, and I'll probably make a video on it as well, but they are allowing states to charge sales taxes to businesses that don't exist in their state for like online purchases and stuff. And this is a decision that will absolutely greatly affect how the economy works and economics, regulatory policy, all sorts of stuff. And so your last statement is just completely off the wall. Okay, now let's go back to our next point. She wrote that the decision prevents the American people from acting through their state and local officials and from making important choices about workplace governance. So, in Justice Elena Kagan's world, the way for the American people to express themselves and to petition their state, local officials and to regulate workplace governance is to force everyone with their diverse opinions to pay money into a monopoly organization, public sector unions. There are very few public sector unions, and as far as I know, they don't overlap. They're very monopolized. These unions are formed up of people that swing heavily left, and they petition the government for policies and various things for their workers. It breaks down, right? You have diversity. It's cut off when everybody's forced to pay into an organization with its own sets of policies and preferences. And it's so strange too that like the first level of reflecting on that situation, we're going to force people to do this. That's like the first problem, right? Like forcing people to take an action they normally wouldn't have done. How do you distill the will of individuals if you force them into an action? Force them into supporting an organization whether or not they agree with its policies. This is some pretty amazing pretzel thinking here. And I mean, hell, this is the danger of having a Supreme Court. You get these people up here and, the whole process of getting them in there is political. Okay. But you could see kind of the flaw of trying to defend forcing people to support an organization that they don't like. Now, I did read a little bit about the point that these public sector unions are negotiating for their union members, but then a lot of these pay and workplace improvements or policies they push for, I'm not going to say they're improvements. I'll roll that back. To whatever changes that they want, they're seeking, also gets applied to people that aren't necessarily part of the union. And that, is sort of this free rider problem. But I think we could all see the issue with me taking my mower and just mowing my entire neighborhood's yards, and then approaching each house and demanding payment from each homeowner, we could see the logical flaw in that problem, right? So I don't think that really holds any water. Especially, I mean, if somebody, like, are you gonna really can you force responsibility onto somebody for an action that they haven't taken? It's pretty silly to think that you can retroactively force someone to owe you something and then coerce them to pay you for it. But okay, that's all I got for this one. There are a number of other Supreme Court cases that have been ruled upon that I think are important, and those videos will be following this one, hopefully in short order. Thanks for listening. Bye.